Have the Jacksonville Jaguars draft plans been made crystal clear, courtesy of ESPN? We're going to be talking about it on this episode of Jags Now, presented by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Cullen Brown, and I'm also happy to say that this episode of Jags Now is presented by PrizePicks. Make sure you show them some love down in the comment section below. We're going to be talking about it, though, the Jaguars draft plans. ESPN released an article about all 32 NFL teams and how they could ace their kind of draft here in less than a week. It's crazy to think about, guys. The 2026 NFL draft is upcoming. It's right here, right around the corner. And I'm going to be breaking things down from the Jaguars side, courtesy of Ben Solak, who wrote this article, and just give my thoughts and reactions on what he had to say. If you guys haven't already, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for the latest Jags news and rumors all year long, 365 days a year. We've got you covered. If Jaguars news is happening or any rumors or any big stories are coming, we're going to have you covered here on the channel. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. All right, getting into Ben Solak here, who wrote up an article, as I mentioned, for all 32 NFL teams. And I just kind of wanted to break down the Jaguars aspect of it, get my thoughts, and kind of just, see what you guys think down below in the comment section. But here's what Solak had to say in regards to the Jaguars. He said, I'd wager the Jaguars sit and make a ton of selections. The only position that clearly needs an impact starter are defensive tackle, and it's a dreadful year for first-round defensive tackles. I would tend to agree. I wouldn't really take any defensive tackle there in the first round, but I digress. And linebacker, after Sonny Styles, there's a big drop-off to linebacker 2. I'd expect the Jaguars to use number 56 on a linebacker to replace the outgoing Devin Lloyd and anticipate the decline of Foyesade Oluokun, who turns 31 this summer. Jake Rodriguez and C.J. Allen have sort of the intangibles Gladstone would admire. So a couple of things here. I'll kind of address the defensive tackle portion of this, then maybe get into the linebacker aspect of it. I would not hate that if the Jaguars went defensive tackle at 56 overall. I think that would be a position that, depending on what they do with Eric Armstead, whether they keep him on this roster or not, I think regardless, you have to get younger at the position. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Your three main defensive tackles on the roster, Matt Dickerson, obviously Devon Hamilton, and Eric Armstead, are all 29 years or older. You have to get younger in that room, and you have to build kind of just waves in your defensive line room that can be able to contribute on a down-to-down basis. And I think there's 5 guys that could potentially be there. 2 guys that I don't think are likely to be potentially there at 56, but maybe they could potentially fall, are Cade McDonald out of the Ohio State University, and then Peter Woods, the defensive tackle out of Clemson, who I think Caden McDonald is an interesting player, really good run defender, hasn't contributed much as a pass rusher, so could he potentially fall in round 2? I'm not sure all the way down to 56, but he's an intriguing option. And then Peter Woods, who had a really productive 2024, but took a step back in 2025, kind of was a weird tweener in terms of where he was placed along that Clemson Tigers defensive line. Could he potentially fall? I'm not sure, but I think he's got enough talent that some team at the top of the second or maybe even the first round could select him. I think 3 guys are more than likely. Lee Hunter, the defensive tackle out of Texas Tech. I'm going to go with Kristen Miller, the defensive tackle out of Georgia. And I'm also going to talk about Caleb Banks, the defensive tackle out of Florida, who I think are all 3 really intriguing defensive tackle options. And I'm going to break down just my kind of general thoughts on them here in just a moment. But guys, this show, like I mentioned off the top, would not be possible without our presenting sponsor. And that, of course, is PrizePicks. Today's show is sponsored by PrizePicks, America's #1 sports picks app. The playoffs are here for basketball. Baseball is underway, and it's time to cash in with PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 sports picks app and is the best place to win cash while watching sports. If you're a hoops guy, you can go with points, rebounds, assists, blocks, or 3-pointers in your lineup. If you're more of a seam head, you can choose hits, home runs, or strikeouts. Regardless of what your sport, PrizePicks has you covered. The app is really easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. For example, you see it right here on screen, I've got a 2-player season-long football lineup that I feel really good about. I've got the more on Trevor Lawrence's 3,699 passing yards. I think he's hit 4,000 passing yards 3 times in his career. Give me the more on that. And Terrell McMillan, more on his receiving touchdowns. I think he is going to go off this upcoming year. $20 lineup to win $60. It's pretty good odds if you ask me. You guys can also follow me on the app to see all of my lineups at CullenBro21. So if you're interested in fading my picks or following my picks, you can do so that way. And don't forget this new offer, guys. Download the PrizePicks app today with a link in the comments and the description and use code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, getting into the rest of this here, talking more specifically about the defensive tackles. We'll start off with Lee Hunter. I was really high on Lee Hunter in this draft process. He had a really good Senior Bowl, somebody that I think rose up draft boards as a result of this. And he was a key part of that Texas Tech defensive front that was one of the best in the country last season. And I think he's a really good run defender. I think he's really quick in space, stronger than I think given credit for. And the question with him is he is an older college player, formerly of the University of Central Florida, before transferring to Texas Tech. Is he ever going to be a pass rusher and somebody that can disrupt things from the interior? That's the big question with him. But I think he has the tools and would be an interesting option if he's there at 56. Same with a guy like Christian Miller, who didn't get a lot in terms of the most snaps, the way they kind of did the rotations at Georgia. He's kind of one of these players that I'm not sure where exactly his range kind of is for NFL teams, much less the Jacksonville Jaguars. But he is somebody that I think he's a younger prospect, kind of around, I want to say 20, 21 years old come draft night. And he is somebody that if you're Jacksonville and you want to potentially get younger at that defensive tackle room, what better than a guy like Christian Miller? But the guy that I think everyone is going to be really curious on is a guy like Caleb Banks, who defensive tackle out of Florida. He dealt with some foot injuries stuff throughout his collegiate career, dealt with it at the NFL Combine, as a matter of fact. And he's somebody that I think if he's fully talented and he's fully able to access his ability as a football player, he, to me, out of every defensive tackle in this draft class, could be a first-round draft caliber defensive tackle. And so I think if you're the Jaguars, Caleb Banks is somebody that if we know the Jaguars sent their kind of medical guys down there to kind of get some evaluation on all these prospects. If Caleb Banks passes your kind of look and your kind of what you're hoping for to get out of a draft prospect, I'd consider him very much so at pick number 56. Getting to the second part of Solak's kind of quote here, talking more about the linebacker position, I kind of disagree with him a little bit. I do think Sonny Styles is probably going to be a guy that goes in the top 10 as an off-ball linebacker, but to kind of dismiss the rest of this linebacker group, I think Jacob Rodriguez is somebody that's very much worthy of a first-round caliber talent out of the University of Texas Tech, really productive his past 2 years as a Red Raider. I think he was somebody that his combination of interceptions, sacks, forced fumbles was something we haven't seen in college football in quite some time. And everyone was sitting there wondering, okay, well, how is he going to test? Like, is he going to be able to keep up with some of the premier athletes in the National Football League? And his RAS score was well in the nines. So he, to me, checks off a box. I think he will be a first-round guy if he's somehow available for the Jaguars at 56. I would very much consider drafting him and having him be your Devin Lloyd replacement. I just don't know if he'll get there during the NFL draft. Some other guys that I think are kind of more round 2, day 2 guys that hopefully one of them's there. If you're Jacksonville, if not, you'll probably pivot from this position because I do think linebacker should be the pick. Like if one of these 3 names are there for Jacksonville, and Solak mentions 2 of them or one of them here in CJ Allen. CJ Allen, he's kind of had his draft stock plummet a little bit just because of his lack of athletic testing and just how he kind of projects as an NFL linebacker. But as somebody who wore the green dot at Georgia for a Kirby Smart level defense, cerebrally, I apologize if I kind of started there, cerebrally, he is regarded as one of the smartest linebacker prospects, not only in this class, but in previous classes before him. He is a guy that can put himself in the right situations, again, play in the SEC, not easy competition. And would he be a guy that would potentially falls to pick number 56 for Jacksonville? I'd be very interested. 2 other names to kind of keep an eye on for the linebacker spot, I would say, are Anthony Hill, the linebacker at Texas, who athletically, he is built to be the next game-changing Pro Bowl-esque type of linebacker at the NFL level, can he put it all together? Can he sit there and harness that ability? Because sometimes he can get a little overzealous when kind of reading in the backfield and everything, but he's got all the ability to be the next rate linebacker in the National Football League. And then a guy like Jake Golday, who former edge at Central Arkansas, converted linebacker into at Cincinnati. They had this guy covering up the seam against slot receivers and tight ends. I mean, it was unbelievable how they used this guy. Really good, fast sideline to sideline linebacker, similar to Anthony Hill. He's not the greatest in terms of having elusive hips, in terms of being able to flip them on a dime or whatever, but I do think he'd be in a potential option if he is there at 56. If I'm Jacksonville, I'm hoping one of those three names slides. I mean, I think you've got three linebacker targets that are realistic for you at 56 overall in CJ Allen, Anthony Hill, and Jake Golday. And I think defensive tackle, if you're looking at a guy like Kristen Miller, Caleb Banks, or Lee Hunter. I think those are six names that, if you're the Jaguars, could be really interesting. One kind of final note from Solak that I'll kind of read and give my thoughts on here that I thought was just kind of noteworthy. He said the following: once the Jaguars get into the bulk of their picks, 3 through the 3rd round, I expect them to grab a committee running back to split time with Bhayshul Tuten. Clemson's Adam Randall, a wide receiver convert, is a cool name to consider his size and pass-catching chops. Defensive tackles also a must-get. We kind of talked about that already, perhaps, with round 3. Development gems such as Tyler Onyedim and Gracen Halton. I do think if they don't go defensive tackle 56, those are two names to keep an eye on, Tyler Onyedim and Gracen Halton, who I've been a huge fan of this draft process. He also says, and I think safety class is too good to pass up, as the starting roles for Eric Murray and Antonio Johnson could be challenged by Zakee Wheatley and Jalon Kilgore. And he says, bottom line, stay, pick, develop, prosper. The only must-gets are defensive tackle and linebacker. Completely agree with that kind of last line there. The only must-gets, defensive tackle, linebacker. Got to get two of those, or one draft pick of each of those positions. I would say on day 2, you have 4 picks to do so. Defensive tackle and linebacker, for sure, got to get it. I would also like edge depth potentially. And then I've kind of tossed and turned where the Jaguars could potentially go with one of those other positions. I just think that edge depth, like if you're able to get a guy like Kieron Crawford there in the round 3, that would be a really interesting option for the Jaguars during the NFL draft, just to kind of add some bodies behind Trayvon Walker, behind Josh Hines-Allen. But I do agree that, defensive tackle, linebacker, just nail those picks. Just don't even think about it. Grab those guys in that front 7 and load up for next season. The safety kind of conversation I've gone back and forth with. I don't think Antonio Johnson's job is by any means threatened. I think he is somebody that is locked in. He is going to be a starter for Anthony Campanelli's unit come 2026 and hopefully beyond. Eric Murray, we'll see. I think I am confident in his ability. He's an NFL veteran who's had a lot of productive snaps at this level. Could they potentially look at a guy like Zakee Wheatley? Would they be interested in a guy like Genesis Smith? I'm not sure, but I do think that's a noteworthy position just to keep in the back of your brain in terms of where Jacksonville could go with one of their 3rd round picks. And then also, Solak mentioned running back. There's a world where the Jaguars could go running back if they're not satisfied with Rodriguez, Bhayshul Tuten, LaQuinn Allen, who I'd at least like to see get a little run. I'd maybe try to focus running back on day 3. I wouldn't necessarily hate it if it was on day 2. I don't think they should do it at 56 overall, even though you lost Travis Etienne to the New Orleans Saints. I don't think that would be a position I would target in the 2nd round. But yeah, I just think that in all, reading this, stay put, just nail the picks, make sure you get a defensive tackle, make sure you get a linebacker. I think that is the number 1 priority for the Jacksonville Jaguars. All right, before I get out of here, I want to ask you guys before we leave, which NFL draft prospect is most likely to end up in Jacksonville? This is somebody we talked about on today's show. This is somebody that I haven't mentioned. Let me know down in the comments section below. And that is going to conclude this episode of Jags Now, presented by Chat Sports. Thank you so much for if you tuned in, and make sure that you subscribe. Don't miss out for all this coverage we've got for you on the channel. And until next time, guys, peace out.